So it's time for my awards in the Premier League this year. Let's get to it quick. And first and foremost, goalkeeper of the year. I don't know. I'd have to go with David Raya. His performance overall ended up being solid, but ends up being interesting in an Arsenal side where goalkeeping ends up being also prime, but also a bit of a curse because we've seen what happens with players like Aaron Ramsdale. We've seen how things have gone with goalkeepers when they come to Arsenal and they leave quickly. Does it mean it's a foreshadowing of things to come? I strongly doubt it. David Raya looked solid. David Raya looked good. And of course, David Raya was one of the reasons why Arsenal was one of the best defenses, if not the best defense, in the Premier League this year. Revelation of the tournament. That's a good one. I will have to go with Aston Villa. What Unai Emery has done, and mind you, I did commentary on I've done it for the past 3 seasons now in the Premier League, and seeing Aston Villa from the day that Steven Gerrard left and the beginning of Unai Emery, that first match you saw that this team had potential. Now, with Unai Emery, well-established Unai Emery, putting a team that is going to the Champions League for the first time, well, technically they've been there, haven't been there in over 40 years, but going into the Champions League for the first time. The last time they ended up going to the Champions League, they won it. And Aston Villa is going to be an interesting team to look at in the Champions League this coming season. So, I enjoyed. I really was enthralled watching and doing games. I did like about 2 or 3 Aston Villa games this season, and I really enjoyed watching them and seeing how they really developed over the past year. Disappointment of the season. Ooh, this one's a good one. Disappointment of the season, because there's a lot of them. We'll have to say United, because obviously where they ended up in the season was a huge drop. I think it was like 16, 17 points less than last season. Chelsea was also a huge disappointment, not just in terms of, but never really finding a way. Is it Mauricio Pochettino's fault? I don't think so necessarily. I don't think he is to be given the entire pie. He should be given a nice size of a slice, but there are a lot of other issues that are surrounding Chelsea and have surrounded Chelsea for the past few years. And Pochettino is just a symptom of something that is much deeper over at Stamford Bridge. Player of the year. You know what? I vote. I do have a vote in the Football Writers Association. I voted for Rodri. Rodri is my player of the year, mine at least. It's my opinion. Although, if you give me anyone else, I would probably look at it as a valid option. Now, I'll give you my top 3. I already gave you number 1. I should have started and made it a little bit more dramatic, but what's the use? My number 3 was Phil Foden. Not a knock on Phil Foden. I'm just the type that likes to be able to stand certain players out because of what they've been able to do and the context with which they did it in. And Phil Foden was just amazing this year in the Premier League. He one of the leading goal scorers. And yet, there was someone else that happened to be more important in terms of how City would function overall. To me, it was Rodri. Maybe Rodri's not going to have the gaudy numbers in terms of offensive output, in terms of goals scored, in terms of assists. But Rodri was the one that made things move around at City. He was the one that offered balance, in my opinion. So, number 1, Rodri. Number 3, Phil Foden. Number 2 was Ollie Watkins. Yes, Ollie Watkins. It's very difficult not to put Ollie Watkins in any top 3. Now, if you have the same top 3 but in a different order, I have no problem with that. I would probably say, yeah, it's a valid point. If you were to bring somebody else, I would say, yeah, you probably have a valid point. But those are the 3 that I saw in terms of what I was able to do. But Ollie Watkins at number 2, there's no way you can't have him at 2 or 3, or even at 1 if you really wanted to. But Ollie Watkins was one of the top 3 leading goal scorers in the Premier League, the top assist giver in the Premier League. Just was amazing for Aston Villa. A very key player for Aston Villa this past season. And now I'm sounding like I love Aston Villa, but I really can't say I do. I'm not a fan, but I do appreciate good football, and I do appreciate when players play well. So there you go. Aston Villa is at number 2 with Ollie Watkins. Coach of the year. Coach of the year. I could go the easy way out and say Pep. I could go the easy way and say Arteta or even Jurgen Klopp as a tribute. Thank you, Jurgen, for everything you've done. But I'm going to go a different route. And hear me out on this one. Andoni Iraola. The guy found water in rocks. The guy was able to really establish a competitive side. Bournemouth, the year before Andoni Iraola took over, was a team that was basically fighting for their relegation lives. Iraola takes over, and it's a solid side where you saw certain players emerge. Dominic Solanke ends up being one of the leading goal scorers in the Premier League, but also a very formidable force on the attack. And you saw how this team kind of galvanized into a style of play that made things very difficult for opposition, that made them even compete for European spots, which would have been unthinkable. I think it was in the month of March or thereabouts that they were fighting for European Cup spots. And that in and of itself ends up being extremely commendable when you look at a squad like Bournemouth, who were just, well, if we stay in the Premier League, we're happy. Now that bar's risen, and now we're going to see how far this team is going to have to invest. And more importantly, where are they going to compete and what are the aspirations going into next year? But to me, Andoni Iraola was a major game changer since his arrival over at Bournemouth. So that's why I picked him as the coach of the year. So, guys, those are my picks. Those are my little outlooks in terms of what the Premier League was. I'll do some for La Liga next week as soon as that tournament is done. But there'll be lots to talk about. And, of course, remember, Copa America will be coming up. We'll be looking to see if I can do some commentary on this channel as well for many games. We shall see what ends up happening. AMA next week, so make sure you guys do leave me some questions so I can answer them as best as possible. And more importantly, your suggestions, your comments. Want to hear exactly what you would like to see, what you would like to hear about, what you would like me to talk about, and of course, anything else that you might even want to say hi. I don't know. But if you want to, do that as well. Until then, ciao. Talk to you soon.